Good morning, everybody. Can you hear all right? Good to see you, Beck. Thanks for joining us. The reading this morning is, in fact, from Mark. It's Mark 5, verses 1 to 20. This gospel is attributed to John Mark, Barnabas's cousin and good friend of Paul and Peter, said to have been written between the mid-50s and the late 60s AD. There's a growing body of evidence, though, that suggests that it was in fact written a little later than that from Rome, when Mark was there with Peter during that terrible time when there was a great persecution of the early Christian church in Rome. Nero was the emperor, and if you recall, AD 64, there was the big fire where Nero blamed, of course, all the Christians for that. So it was a terrible time for Christians, and it was said that Mark had written this to sort of lift the spirits of the Gentile Christians, particularly in Rome. So from Mark 5, verses 1 to 20, this is Jesus restores a demon-possessed man. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with the chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the chains of the irons on his feet, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. But then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people. Tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And so the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. And this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Paul. I wonder how many of you have heard stories of demon possession. I remember when the original Ghostbusters movie came out in '84, and the circles of Christians that I moved in definitely detected something diabolical going on there. But that's roughly as close as I've come to demons, I think. I've had my own mysterious experiences where things seem to have happened within my body that I couldn't necessarily understand. I've seen others behave strangely that could have been demons, but it's not easy to know what causes even the things that take place within our own body sometimes. Demon possession, as much as we know anything about it, would appear to be a form of torment. While there must be some kind of payoff for the possessed person to facilitate the process of possession, It is by no means a happy condition. The possessed are usually portrayed as angry and violent. They are no longer in control of themselves. Other personalities or wills are being expressed in and through the possessed person. And these outside wills come from somewhere. Their impact is obviously very traumatic, and they cause the person deep distress. Perhaps the most traumatic and distressing event that can befall anyone is to become the target of community accusation such that the person is condemned and utterly rejected. Community rejection is so distressing because we know without community we are finished. Whether it's the most practical physical level because we can't survive on our own, or whether you look at the higher levels of life like identity and meaning and purpose, we cannot develop any of these things on our own either. They're all relational. They all require community. To be cast out is a horrifying prospect. It is so horrifying, in fact, that as a last gasp psychological attempt to be counted with the others, a person may even join with the group that is condemning and rejecting them, because at least in this way, the person can be one with the group, even though the group is condemning them. It's a really interesting psychological thing that's been observed. And so the accusations and condemnations of others become internalized in the condemned person. Now, there are less dramatic examples of this phenomenon. Most people who have ever spent time in the counselling room will have identified, we could call them voices or personality traits of others that they unwittingly have internalized. We commonly have the voices of those who raised us, still directing us long after we've left the households in which we were raised. It was Aristotle who said, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man," because he knew the power of the earliest influences on a person's development and life. These voices persist within us, and they can shape the way we navigate the various relationships and circumstances we encounter. You may be interested to know that our word demon comes from the Greek daimon, which is derived from the Greek verb dio, and that means to distribute destinies. So it's very life-shaping stuff. Once a voice is internalized, it's pretty hard to get rid of. It's usually there until we deliberately kick it out or remove it. And this is a bit tricky because most of the time we're not aware such things are shaping the way we choose our paths. They've become so much part of us as we've grown up. And these voices and influences provide for us the parameters of what we consider allowable. They tell us what to expect from the world. They can even have the power to tell us who we are. Now, the man in today's story had internalized the voices of accusation, judgment, and condemnation. He no longer needed anyone around him to express these things towards him. He carried those accusations and judgments wherever he went. And as a result, he was compelled to act towards himself as he would act toward anyone who was judged and condemned, and that was stoning. He was effectively stoning himself, bashing himself against the rocks in this very rugged terrain, living among the tombs like a dead man. And then one day, somebody climbs out of a boat and changes everything for him. Our account is very brief here. We don't get anything more than the essentials, but it's clear Jesus did not reject this man. He would have been quite a sight, I reckon. Not like some rambunctious teenager who's just made some alternative style choices in his life. This man was ragged, dirty, bloody from his perpetual self-harm, and violently screaming in an aggressive manner as he ran towards the arriving party. Most of us would have retreated straight back onto the boat and found another beach to arrive on. Jesus engages a man. The first thing he does is ask his name. I imagine no one would have shown this man that kind of courtesy for as long as he could remember. And we get a sense of this in his reply because he actually cannot remember his name. The man is now so lost in the accusing and condemning crowd in his head, he no longer knows himself apart from them. It is as though they have become him. He wanted to be part of them originally, part of the group, and instead they've become part of him, internalized in him. Very quickly, this man is aware that the voice of Jesus is very different. Jesus is not accusing him. Jesus is not condemning him. And the man's reaction is visceral. There's a reflexive repulsion almost. So what have you got to do with me? The two were coming from such different places. In a funny kind of way, I've encountered similar reactions at times as I've sought to befriend people in the community, and often people get to know me and they quite like me, and they're then really surprised to discover I'm a reverend, make of that what you will. And often the next line is something along the lines of, you don't know me, you're a holy man, and I can't begin to tell you how holy I am, they might say. But love is not put off. Love does not allow the rejection and condemnation to be the final word. Jesus goes in hard. The unclean spirits knew they were beat. They begin to negotiate their withdrawal and then are dismissed altogether. I remember in the days when we used to meet here at church, that was only last week, but anyway, there used to be a couple of older women who sat on the bench outside the pub there on Sunday mornings quite early when I would come across early to do set-up. And they're both characters in their own right. They used to sit at the benches and make comments at me as I'd walk past, sometimes 2 or 3 times because I forget stuff. And I was always chatting with them, and when the music started, they loved listening to the church music. And I said to them, you should come in and enjoy the service. And one morning, one of them said, the church would fall down if I walked into it. And I just couldn't let that comment go. I turned and I said, we've got people much worse than you in there. And I said, I wouldn't mind betting that I'm much worse than both of you. And I can't really recall the right words that I used at the time, but I said, that's who we are as church. We're the collection of people who've woken up to the reality that we need God. When the fear of condemnation is removed, new options, previously outside the realm of consideration, become possible. The man who had so desperately wanted to be one with the group who was rejecting him suddenly had a different option. He could become a friend of Jesus. And becoming a friend of Jesus meant he could let go of his association with the group that condemned him. He was free. My family are big Maxwell Smart fans, Agent 86 of Control. We've watched the whole original series that was made in the 60s, and I also enjoyed the movie that was more recently made. And there's a scene in the movie set in a ballroom with a dance going on where there's a group of very attractive Russian women waiting to dance. And Maxwell Smart approaches this group and asks if one of them would like to dance. There's a pretty woman in the front of the group and she kind of looks at him mockingly and laughs and goes, go away. Whereupon Max responds that he wasn't actually talking to her. behind this group of pretty women, there's a very large woman sitting. She's not displaying any hope of being asked to dance. She's hanging around and hiding behind the popular girls because she had no other option. And Max asks her to dance. She's very surprised and a little bit shy, and the pretty girls all scoff and think it's ridiculous, but Max persists. He's not put off. He promises it will be fun. And the pair dance in a stunningly beautiful way together. It's worth seeing. The whole ballroom become entranced with their style, and at the end of the dance, they all applaud. And Max and the women bow and part, and as she walks past the group she was previously hiding behind, she gives them a gesture that indicates she's now free of their condemnation. The experience of being not condemned can be powerfully liberating. You see, condemnation destroys. I'm not sure there's any net benefit in exploring what unclean spirits or demons are, or what is entailed in the notion of possession. I mean, if you measure the temperature in Fahrenheit or Celsius, it doesn't change how hot it is. What you label a thing is not material to its effect, as it were. I do believe this story shines light on the fact that accusation, judgment, and condemnation are destructive. When the legion are dismissed into the herd of pigs, they simply and senselessly destroy them. Accusation, judgment, and condemnation are attempts to deal with apparent evil. It is as though we want to keep the evil as far from ourselves as possible, and that makes perfect sense at one level. So we identify someone other than ourselves as the culprit, and then we seek to destroy the evil by destroying them. Of course, there are times when knowing who did what is crucial for diagnosing an issue and working out what to do better next time. However, accusation, and more particularly blame, are generally not about better understanding. They're about fear and retribution. They do nothing towards clarifying a situation. And again, condemn is a word we get from a Latin root. I'm not sure how to say it. It's condemnar or condemnare. Greek person, condemnare. Yep. And this is a combination of com, which is an intensive prefix, and damnare, which is to harm or damage. Accusation, judgment, and condemnation are intended to be destructive. And we might console ourselves that we are destroying evil, but whenever we are destroying anything, we should be very careful. The tragic reality is all manner of heinous acts have been justified by saying they are the will of God. By contrast, Jesus engages the man with grace. There is no fear in Jesus. There is no accusation or judgment. Jesus does not condemn or push away. In fact, his open engagement with the man opens the man to parting company with his legion of spirits. The man has encountered a new friend, a friend far more preferable to the group that were accusing and condemning him. And Jesus' approach of grace restores the man. He can leave his past that had possessed him and return to his community. There is no need to hold on to this internalized pseudo-community. Now, even though this is a profoundly hope-filled story of liberation, there was this herd of innocent pigs that died in the process, and the owners of those pigs and related economic interests, and indeed the community in general, were not particularly thrilled by Jesus' work. I suspect if you asked them straight out, would you swap the herd of pigs for the restoration of this man to his life and community, they probably would have said, no, we'll take our pigs back, thanks. To them, the man was not worth as much as their pigs. There are always vested interests. the beneficiaries of the status quo, and generally that's most of us, and we're happy with the way things are. It's interesting because when the townspeople see the restored man, they get frightened. When this story was told to a community of farmers in Iowa, the farmers were surprised that the townspeople were frightened when they saw Jesus. One farmer stood up and said, No, the people should have been angry about the loss of their livestock. But it was the change in the spiritual realities that unnerved them far more than the loss of their assets upset them. So Jesus makes a strategic withdrawal, leaving this man as a living testimony to the life that he brings. A fruitful testimony, it would seem, because a few chapters later in Mark, when Jesus is back in that area, crowds begin to follow him. And that's likely due in part to the stories that this man would have told about his encounter with Jesus. Whatever we make of the notion of possession by unclean spirits, we can recognise times when destructive external influences can have an outsized control over a person's behaviour. I can't help but think of the people involved in the Capitol riots in Washington on January 6th. Many of those who behaved aggressively and destructively have now found themselves in court where they've testified with words to the effect of, "It's like I've woken up after a bad dream and I cannot reconcile my behaviour with who I am." It's as if they were possessed by something other than themselves. And I believe that there is truth in their testimony. When incidents like that occur, the temptation is to condemn, whether it's someone else or perhaps even ourselves. And this has a payoff for those who are doing the condemning. They get to feel righteous, but it offers very limited help. If we are hoping for substantive change in a life-giving direction, only forgiveness, grace, and love get us there. That's not to say consequences are removed from actions, but a way beyond mere judgment, condemnation, and expulsion must be found. And Jesus did not balk at extending grace to the condemned. And to this very day, his grace remains the only power that can truly set us free. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for your amazing grace. You are not frightened or put off. You continue to embrace and welcome and forgive and set free. And so we come to you. We come to you as those who need you, that you might set us free in your glorious grace. Amen.